Have you ever met someone who confidently explains a topic they barely understand, as if they were an expert? Maybe a coworker who insists they know better than professionals, or an online commenter who's absolutely convinced they've done their own research. It's frustrating, right? But it's more than just arrogance. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, first described by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger. In this video, we'll break down why incompetence often leads to overconfidence, how this bias shapes real-world decisions, and, most importantly, how to protect yourself from falling into this cognitive trap. Whether it's in the workplace, on social media, or even in politics, the Dunning-Kruger effect influences our daily lives in ways we often fail to recognize. This analysis is presented for educational purposes under fair use, exploring scientific research to promote better critical thinking. I once had a friend who, after watching a few finance videos, believed he could predict stock market trends better than economists. He dismissed any contrary evidence until he lost a significant sum. That's when reality hit. Maybe you've seen something similar? Section 1. The Discovery of Mount Stupid. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger at Cornell University conducted a fascinating study that would forever change our understanding of overconfidence and incompetence. They wanted to test a simple question. Do people who lack skill in a particular area realize how little they actually know? To find out, they designed a series of tests assessing participants' abilities in humor, logical reasoning, and grammar. After completing the tests, participants were asked to estimate how well they performed compared to others. The results were shocking. Those who scored in the bottom 25% of the group consistently overestimated their abilities, believing they had performed far above average. In fact, on average, they ranked themselves in the 62nd percentile, far higher than reality. This phenomenon has since been visualized as Mount Stupid, the peak of confidence that occurs when someone knows just enough to feel like an expert, but not enough to recognize their severe knowledge gaps. But here's the paradox. While the least competent people overestimated their abilities, the most competent individuals often underestimated themselves. Experts, aware of the vast complexity of their field, tended to assume that others knew as much as they did. This expert underestimation is another key aspect of the Dunning-Kruger effect, one that explains why genuinely knowledgeable individuals sometimes lack confidence, while the least informed people often sound the most certain. And this isn't just a quirky psychology experiment. It applies to nearly every area of life. Whether it's people who argue against climate science with zero scientific background, individuals diagnosing themselves with medical conditions from a quick Google search, or social media influencers claiming expertise in economics after watching a few YouTube videos, the Dunning-Kruger effect is everywhere. So what makes Mount Stupid so dangerous? It's not just ignorance, it's ignorance of ignorance. Section 2. The dual burden of incompetence. One of the most insidious aspects of the Dunning-Kruger effect is what psychologists call metacognitive blindness, a lack of awareness about one's own lack of knowledge. In simple terms, metacognition refers to thinking about thinking. It's the ability to evaluate your own skills and recognize the limits of your knowledge. But for those deeply affected by Dunning-Kruger, this skill is severely lacking. This leads to what researchers call the dual burden of incompetence. A lack of skill prevents competent performance. That same lack of skill makes it impossible to recognize one's own incompetence. This explains why the least competent people are often the most confident. They aren't just wrong, they don't even realize they're wrong. The statistics paint a clear picture. 93% of American drivers rate themselves as above average. Mathematically, this is impossible. Overconfidence bias at its finest. In the workplace, 40% of employees believe they rank in the top 5% of performers. Again, the numbers don't add up. But why does this happen? The answer lies in the brain itself. Studies show that overconfident individuals exhibit heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex, a region linked to familiarity and pattern recognition, meaning they feel like they understand something even when they don't. Meanwhile, true experts activate the hippocampus and memory retrieval networks, which help them cross-check information and recognize gaps in their knowledge. This explains why experts tend to underestimate their abilities. They are more aware of what they don't know, while the unskilled remain blissfully unaware of their ignorance. And this isn't just about being wrong. It's about lacking the tools to even realize you're wrong. That's what makes the Dunning-Kruger effect so dangerous. It's a perfect storm of ignorance and confidence, shaping everything from workplace decisions to public debates. Section 3. The real-world impact of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just an academic concept. It has real consequences in politics, social media, workplaces, education, and even public health. In today's world, where misinformation spreads rapidly, the combination of overconfidence and ignorance creates significant risks. Political polarization and the illusion of knowledge. One of the most alarming areas where Dunning-Kruger plays out is in politics. Studies have found that during elections, voters who scored lowest on policy knowledge tests overestimated their understanding by 40 percentile points. This false confidence reinforces political tribalism, where people cling to strong opinions despite lacking deep knowledge. When people believe they know more than they do, they are less likely to engage with opposing viewpoints, fueling extreme polarization. Social media and the rise of illusory fluency. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook amplify the Dunning-Kruger effect by fostering what psychologists call illusory fluency, the false sense of understanding complex issues after reading simplified or misleading explanations. Social media rewards confidence over accuracy, meaning the loudest voices, often the least informed, gain the most attention. Algorithm-driven echo chambers then reinforce these misconceptions, making it even harder for individuals to recognize their knowledge gaps. The workplace, when confidence outweighs competence. In professional settings, the Dunning-Kruger effect can lead to poor decision-making. Research shows that the least competent employees often overestimate their abilities, while those with actual expertise tend to doubt themselves. This can create a dangerous dynamic where unqualified individuals dominate discussions and decision-making, while skilled professionals hesitate to speak up. Over time, this not only reduces workplace efficiency, but also stifles innovation and critical thinking. Education and the learning trap. The effect is also visible in education. Studies show that students performing in the bottom quartile spend 30% less time reviewing materials because they believe they've already mastered the concepts. This false sense of understanding prevents deeper learning, making academic improvement even harder. Public health and misinformation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, research found that individuals with minimal scientific knowledge were 3.2 times more likely to spread misinformation while believing themselves to be well-informed. This highlights how Dunning-Kruger can fuel public health crises, where overconfident individuals dismiss expert advice, leading to real-world harm. Cultural differences, a surprising finding. Interestingly, studies suggest that collectivist cultures like Japan show reduced Dunning-Kruger effects compared to individualistic societies, where self-promotion is more common. This suggests that cultural values may influence how people assess their own competence. The Dunning-Kruger effect, combined with confirmation bias and social media algorithms, creates a perfect storm in today's information ecosystem, one where misinformation thrives and self-awareness is harder than ever to cultivate. Section 4. The path to self-awareness, overcoming the Dunning-Kruger effect. Recognizing the Dunning-Kruger effect in ourselves is challenging because, by definition, we don't know what we don't know. However, research shows that by cultivating intellectual humility and actively engaging in deliberate practice, we can improve our ability to assess our own competence more accurately. Deliberate practice, the power of immediate feedback. One of the most effective ways to combat overconfidence bias is through deliberate practice, a structured learning method where individuals receive immediate feedback and make incremental improvements. Studies show that structured practice can reduce self-assessment errors by 22%, helping people develop more accurate mental models of their abilities. Peer comparison and benchmarking for accuracy. Another proven method for improving self-awareness is peer benchmarking. In medical training programs, anonymized peer data comparisons have been shown to improve calibration by 35%. Seeing objective data on how others perform helps individuals gauge their true skill level, reducing both overestimation and underestimation of competence. Metacognitive training. Thinking about thinking. Developing metacognitive skills. The ability to reflect on our own thinking can significantly reduce the impact of the Dunning-Kruger effect. One powerful technique is the pre-mortem strategy, where before making a decision, you ask, if this fails, what will have caused it? This simple shift in perspective forces individuals to consider their blind spots and recognize potential flaws in their reasoning. Educational strategies, learning to recognize knowledge gaps. Traditional education often focuses on confirming what students already know. However, research suggests that formative assessments, which highlight gaps in knowledge rather than reinforcing existing beliefs, are far more effective in counteracting overconfidence. The role of technology and self-assessment. Emerging AI tools can now detect linguistic patterns associated with overconfidence in writing and speech. These systems provide objective feedback, helping individuals recognize when their certainty outpaces their actual knowledge. The ultimate solution: intellectual humility. Perhaps the most powerful antidote to the Dunning-Kruger effect is intellectual humility, the ability to acknowledge the limits of one's knowledge. By embracing a lifelong learning mindset, we can move beyond Mount Stupid and toward true expertise. Section 6. Practical strategies to overcome the Dunning-Kruger effect. Recognizing the Dunning-Kruger effect in ourselves is the first step. But how do we actively combat it? Developing self-assessment techniques and practicing intellectual humility can help us avoid the trap of overconfidence while fostering genuine expertise. Here are some practical strategies you can apply in daily life. 1. The knowledge mapping technique. A powerful way to assess your actual expertise is to create a knowledge inventory with 3 columns. What you know with certainty, what you know you don't know, potential unknown unknowns, topics you might be unaware of. By actively categorizing your knowledge, you can identify gaps and shift from false confidence to intellectual curiosity. 2. Seeking disconfirming evidence. Cognitive biases often push us to seek information that supports our beliefs, rather than challenging them. A useful habit is to actively search for opposing viewpoints. The psychological discomfort you feel when encountering contradictory evidence is actually a sign of intellectual growth. 3. Creating feedback loops. One of the best ways to improve self-awareness is to establish calibration checks. Before making a prediction or decision, estimate how confident you are. Compare your prediction with actual results. Adjust future estimations based on past accuracy. This technique reduces self-assessment errors over time and helps develop a more realistic sense of competence. 4. Reflective journaling for self-awareness. Try this journaling prompt. What topics do I feel most confident about, and how might I be overestimating my knowledge? Writing down your thoughts helps reveal potential blind spots and prevents Mount Stupid from creeping in. 5. Confidence calibration in professional settings. In the workplace, teams can implement confidence calibration exercises where employees rate their certainty before receiving objective feedback. Research shows that these exercises improve decision-making accuracy and help mitigate overconfidence bias. 6. Practicing digital literacy. Before sharing an opinion or information online, pause and ask yourself, am I an actual expert on this topic, or do I just feel like one? This simple habit can reduce misinformation, improve critical thinking, and foster a more informed online culture. Ultimately, the best antidote to Dunning-Kruger is to embrace lifelong learning. Expertise is not a destination, it's a continuous journey.